Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show, I'm your host. So Dune Part 2 is going to be seeing the introduction of a big villain, and throughout this video we're going to be going through everything you need to know about Austin Butler's Feyd. If you've seen the original David Lynch movie, then this is the same character that Sting played, but there's far more depth to him than what we got in that. Though he stood around looking like an evil Ed Sheeran with a constant smirk on his face, he actually has deep ties with Paul and the Kwisatz Haderach. He's such an interesting character, and it's important to bear in mind that Feyd's supposed to be Paul's opposite in more ways than one. Now, when looking at storytelling, we often get the idea of a doppelganger to reflect what the hero could be had they taken a different path. The Hitchcockian doubles something that's laced throughout a lot of film, and these doubles act as a way where we can compare and contrast certain characters together. On the surface, Feyd is Paul's double, and both represent the heirs that will eventually rule their house one day. Whoever's the more powerful out of the two has been thought to rule the galaxy, and that's why there's a lot of focus on the Atreides and Harkonnens. Now, these two sides are clearly bitter rivals in the Dune universe, and that first film centered around the Harkonnens destroying the Atreides and taking back Arrakis. You should call the police for what they did, because it was a sting in the plan. This feud is something that's gone back centuries, but there were plans to unite the pair before they were even born. Just like Paul, Feyd was part of the Bene Gesserit's breeding program, and if you're still kind of getting up to speed on Dune, then we have some stuff that we need to touch upon before we go further into who the character is. Now, the Bene Gesserit's goal at this point is to create a supreme being known as the Kwisatz Haderach. In the Dune world, ingesting spice can give you certain abilities, and some can tap into the genetic memories of their ancestors, which gives them access to a wealth of information. Unfortunately, the Bene Gesserit being all women, I'm not saying that unfortunately like that, it's unfortunate they're women, but unfortunately by them being women, it means that they can only access the memories on the female side. I might re-record that, or I might leave it in. However, with the Kwisatz Haderach being male, this will allow them to tap into the male side, and thus they'll have access to more information spanning tens of thousands of years. If we look at the social structures in Dune, the women tend to be the more subservient ones, whilst the men are the leaders, and therefore being able to gain access to this information will be far more helpful than just being able to tap into the women's. Now, the Gesserit have been carrying out the breeding program for roughly 10,000 years, with the goal almost being complete. Now, they've also used religion as a way to manipulate and control the masses, and have spread the idea this great being's coming, which has been labelled as a prophecy. However, they're of course using science to ensure it happens, so when it does, they'll also be seen as the religious figures that people need to get behind. Hearing of this prophecy has meant that people are simply waiting for this new figure to arrive, and whoever shows up and fits the mold, they're all going to start to follow them. And that's why so many people flock to Paul so easily, but the Bene have their own plans in place too. They see the Kwisatz Haderach as being a pawn they can place on the throne, and then through him they'll be able to control the galaxy. They'd have to oust the Emperor to do it, but he is getting old, and thus they'd have access to this unrivaled control and power. The first film doesn't really go into this, but there were actually multiple people that were being groomed to be the Kwisatz Haderach. The fact of the matter is that Paul also wasn't originally planned to be this person either, but the shoe ended up fitting, and thus the Bene went for it. Now, throughout Dune, we often get lip service paid to the fact that Lady Jessica was supposed to have a daughter, but the Duke wanted a son, and thus she selected this instead. Spice can allow one to select the gender of their child, and she did this out of the love for the Duke instead of going with what the Order wanted. Now, this destroyed their plans a bit, and it also sealed the fate of the Atreides. Originally, the plan was to have this daughter marry the Harkonnens' heir, who, as you guessed, was going to be Feyd. This would unite the houses and stop them from continuing their feud, and it was then their child that was going to be the Kwisatz Haderach. That's also why he's sort of an opposite to Paul, as he was originally supposed to be the son that would bring them all together. However, had Feyd gotten power, I think that the universe would have suffered for it, and in the new trailer we get some brief shots of him in which he looks extremely ruthless. He probably doesn't ever hit the thumbs up button on videos, even though it takes 2 seconds, and he looks violent and vicious in these black and white scenes. Now, Feyd was born on the planet Lankavale, and he's the younger brother of Glossu Rabban, who's played in the film by Dave Bautista. Feyd's father Abelard was well aware of how poisonous the Harkonnen name was, and he saw that Rabban had continued to bring this dishonour. In Feyd, he'd hoped he could right the wrongs of the past, but Feyd was taken by the Baron whilst Rabban killed their father. He gained the nickname the Beast Rabban, and the Baron raised Feyd on Gedi Prime as an heir to the throne. Now the Bene realised that these two houses going to war would not only be bad for the galaxy, but also bad for their plans, which had taken 10,000 years to put together. Realising that if both Paul and Feyd died, that they'd lose all the genetic material, they sent out a spy in Margot Fenring to seduce Feyd so that a child could be born carrying on his DNA. In the film, Margot will be played by Léa Seydoux, and we get some black and white shots of her looking over Feyd as he fights in the combat arena. Talked about this in our trailer breakdown, but I think this black and white style actually shows that this is all a flashback, and we'll have the blanks filled in as to what Feyd was up to when everything was happening on Arrakis. Margot fell pregnant and she gave birth to a daughter named Maria, who we'll touch upon briefly towards the end of the video. Now, in order to talk about what happens with Feyd, we have to get into some heavy spoilers, so yeah, if you don't want to know, you don't want it ruined, then turn off now, and I won't hold a grudge, I promise. Anyway, the Baron's original plan was to have Feyd marry the Emperor's daughter Illyran, who's played by Florence Pugh in the movie. This would give the Baron complete control over the universe due to them having their quote-unquote son now sat on the throne. His plan the entire time was to gain an alliance with the Emperor, allow the Atreides to take over Arrakis, kill them there, and then retake the planet and usher in their rule. The Emperor was jealous that the Atreides were growing in popularity and that their military strength was getting to the point where they were too powerful to combat. Now, after the fall of the Atreides, the Baron actually allowed the Beast to rule over Arrakis for some time, and the tyranny that he brought with him destroyed a lot of villages and settlements. This wasn't the Beast going crazy though, and they were like, oh, we need to take him down. The Baron was well aware that this would be the outcome of placing him in that position of power. Now, he did this because when Feyd showed up and was more merciful, he'd seem like a saviour, and this would make people flock to him and allow him to gain power. However, they didn't count on Paul being alive, and after he became the leader of the Fremen, he then started an uprising. Waging war on Arrakis and the Harkonnens, he started to take the planet back, which then got the attention of the Baron and the Emperor. Paul stormed the capital, sort of gave a challenge of combat, and it all came to a head in the knife fight that we see teased in the trailer. Feyd was chosen as the champion, and Paul came face to face with him, besting the baddie in combat. Eventually it was Paul who married Irulan, and even though he'd been hooking up with Chani, this wedding stopped the war escalating beyond Arrakis. Now, Paul would go on to lead, but it wouldn't be the big peaceful reign everyone hoped for, and millions were murdered in his name. Described as a holy war, this ravaged the galaxy, and countless people lost their lives in service of his new vision of what the universe should be like, caused lots of unrest, and this is where we get back to Marie. She was entrusted with assassinating Paul, but unfortunately this ended up failing. Now, there's lots of complicated things going on with him, and Paul does kind of right some of the wrongs of the past and the aftermath of all the battles. That tied in with the whole Children of Dune saga in which his kids ended up taking over the reins whilst he went out into the desert and had an awakening. Sort of a big Jesus metaphor with him returning to stop further bloodshed, but it's a really interesting story that I actually recommend you check out. Now, Paul's a very flawed hero, and sort of the outcome of people around him attempting to gain power for themselves. That's also the case with Feyd, and though they're painting him out like a complete psycho, he was very much groomed and manipulated as much as Paul was. It's going to be interesting to see how it all goes down, and I can't, well, we know because we've spoiled it, but I can't wait to see it in live action and how it plays out in the movie. Obviously, let me know your thoughts below on the character, and if there's any other Dune characters you'd like to see us cover, then make sure you let us know below. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of the trailer, which will be linked on screen right over here. Got lots of things to talk about, lots of characters to break down, and definitely head over there right after this. By the way, thanks for sticking through the video. I've been Paul, I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.